Today on the Lazy RPG Talk Show, we're going to talk about the latest things going on in the world of Sly Flourish. Ironsworn has a new bundle of holding. Ghostfire has a new Kickstarter for the Ethereal Expanse Dreamed of the Drowned God mega adventure. Season 4 selects the role-playing system that they're going to use. What is it? The answer may or may not surprise you. There is a brand new Unearthed Arcana set of playtest subclasses that have just come out that are giving us a hint about a new campaign setting that Wizards of the Coast may be publishing. We have a new preview of the Cypher system by Monte Games, so we can actually dive into some of the mechanics that they've been talking about. I'm going to dive into the Nimble box set, the new Nimble box set, which I received a preview copy of, and I want to talk about Nimble because it's very interesting. I'm going to talk about how to fix Counterspell and also at the same time deal with monster spell-like attacks that are not spells. And we're going to cover more questions from the Patreon Q&A all today on the Lazy RPG Talk Show. I'm Mike Shea, your pal from Sly Flourish, here to talk about all things in tabletop role-playing games. This past week on Sly Flourish, I published an article called Lazy 5e Magic Item Prices. You can find a link down in the show notes for this. It's on Sly Flourish as well. This is the second of 3 articles where I'm going to be talking about magic items for 5e. 5e overall, not just for D&D 2024, but for all of the versions of 5e to offer simple tips and guidelines for handling treasure and magic items. The first article was about treasure. How much treasure could you give out, and what are some easy parcels that you can give out for treasure in your games? This one is about how much to buy or sell magic items for, and offer some basic guidelines for determining how much you should charge for a magic item, but more importantly about how to limit the magic items that characters can buy so things don't get too out of hand. That is this article. And then the next article is going to be about crafting magic items and ways that you can set up a very easy, lazy system for crafting magic items that also ensures that players don't just start swimming in all of the best loot that's tailor-made for their particular character, but instead put some control on it. So that's going to be in an article in the future. But that article just came out this past week. The next article that is coming out this coming week is Tracking Turns the Shadowdark Way. I'm a big fan of Shadowdark. I love it. There's an interesting way that Shadowdark handles the tracking of turns, and some ways that I did it in the year-long Shadowdark campaign that I ran that actually you can use for pretty much any role-playing game, but certainly for any sort of like 5e based role-playing game that helps you ensure that you're keeping characters in mind, that the characters are getting a good spotlight, and that you're able to kind of keep things moving and rolling forward. So that is in the upcoming article. The best way to get that article is to subscribe to the Sly Flourish newsletter. There is a link down in the show notes, absolutely free to sign up, and you get articles like this sent directly to your inbox every week for free. Absolutely free to sign up. Next week on the Sly Flourish Patreon, for hero tier subscribers of the Patreon, I am going to be putting up Key of Worlds 14. I think I accidentally put it up early. I put it up on Sunday or Saturday. I don't know. Was it yesterday? No, Friday. I don't remember. It's actually already out. It wasn't supposed to come out till Wednesday, but it is available for Hero Tier patrons. You can find it on your Hero Tier reward page. This is the penultimate scenario for the Key of Worlds arc from the from the City of Arches. So City of Arches has these different campaign adventures. One of these campaign settings is for a arc called the Key of Worlds, and I have put together 15 scenarios that follow each of the paths of the City of Arches for the Key of Worlds. And they are all released now except for the final one for the Vault of the Key of Worlds. Let me show an example. So this one is a fun one because it is of the Temple of the Nameless King, a lost temple deep in the outer reaches. And here in this temple, old followers of the Nameless King are guarding an artifact that they don't even recognize. They don't even know what it does, but the characters do, and they need to get there to ignite the Blackfire brazier there so that they can open the doorways to the Vault of the Key of Worlds and capture the key before evildoers get it instead. So these scenarios are short. They're about 4 pages long. They give you an idea of like how you might start it off. They are meant to be part of this long arc, but you don't have to run them that way. You can instead grab pieces from it and run it as one-shot adventures. There's advice for how to run it as a single, sort of a one-shot thing. We have secrets and clues, key NPCs, encounters while you're going through it, traps and hazards you might run into, and short descriptions of the locations that are going on there and the main villain that's there, treasures that you might pick up, and then the follow-on adventure types. So really fun. So the final one of these is going to be coming out in a couple of weeks, but this one, Temple of the Nameless King, which is the third of the third. So there are 3 different Blackfire Braziers. Each of them have 3 scenarios that follow them. And this is that. So there are 9 total ones for that. And then there's all of the scenarios that take you up to that point. And now they've all been released except the final one, which is the Vault of the Key of Worlds itself. So really fun. So you can pick up this scenario by becoming a hero tier subscriber to the Sly Flourish Patreon. You also get readings and reflections in which I read previous articles and out loud and then talk about some of the background on them. So you get lots of great things for being a hero tier level supporter of the Sly Flourish Patreon. One of the other tools that you get for becoming a Sly Flourish Patreon is the 5e Artisanal database. The 5e Artisanal database is a whole pile of different tools to help you run your 5e games. Each week I've been talking about different parts of these tools. Today I'm just going to talk about a quick one, which are treasure generators. So we have a whole bunch of different generators for NPCs, monuments, locations, all kinds of things. But one of the big ones that I focused on was treasure. I have 3 different main treasure generators. One that is called the Lazy 5e generator, which is my own custom generator built on the principles that I've come up with for what kind of treasure to give out in any 5e game, whether it's 2024 D&D, 2014 D&D, Level Up Advanced 5e, or Tales of the Valiant. You can use that one for any of them. But I also made specific generators for 2024 D&D that uses their rules for generating treasure, and Tales of the Valiant, which uses their rules. Well, it's a slight modification of the rules for Tales of the Valiant because theirs is weird, but very simple to use. You go into the treasure generator, you select the tier of the treasure. You can either base it based on the level of the challenge that they're facing or based on the level of the characters. It really doesn't matter too much. You select it, you hit generate, and it gives you a list of treasure. It links to the magic items that are inside the 5e ADB, so you can click them and you can see what the treasure does. You can also grab this list. It's a markdown list, so you can grab this and drop it right into your notes if you want to drop it right into your notes. Very easy to use and very easy to generate. You don't like what you get, you hit generate again and you get other stuff. So really straightforward. This one talks about what the expectations are for the amount of treasure that's given out over particular tiers. It's meant to be session based. So what you do, and if you've ever watched any of my prep shows, you'll see this is how I do it. I generate a set of treasure, I grab that treasure, I throw it in my notes, and then the next session I may or may not release the treasure that I have written down in that list. But I have this nice list, and I'll go through it and edit it and say, no, that doesn't really make sense for this situation, or I'd rather add something because I want to put a particular item for a particular character. I've certainly done that. So there's lots of ways to do that. So the 2024 treasure generator is built upon D&D 2024 treasure generation rules using all of the stuff that's available in the system reference document. And again, you can sort of pick it, and this one clicks to 5e SRD stuff. It will list non-SRD stuff, but it doesn't have a link because we don't actually have it. It's not released under a Creative Commons license or anything like that. So like Stone of Good Luck is not linked, but Robe of Useful Items is linked. So this is all based on the tables that are inside the D&D 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide. So a nice, easy treasure generator for that. Works very well. So if you're running D&D 2024 and you want to use their style of treasure generation, you can use that. But you could also use the Lazy 5e one if you like that one better. It's up to you. Same with Tales of the Valiant. So Tales of the Valiant, same thing. This one is still based on 5.1 SRD magic items because most of the magic items that are in Tales of the Valiant are 5.1 magic items anyway, so I didn't bother to put an entire set of magic items. That's pretty much the same as the magic items that are already there. And this one is broken down a little differently because Tales of the Valiant uses a different kind of treasure system than the other ones. It uses large parcels over a set of levels rather than single parcels that you could use per session. But I broke it down per session and dropped it into here. So I'm using this one because I'm running Tales of the Valiant in my Sunday game, so I will use this specific one. And I added some other things like the acidic Feish copper incense bowl, the buried abyssal brass metal inlaid with citrine, and stuff like that. So it's got some little modifications. The Tales of the Valiant one isn't exactly like what you would find in the Tales of the Valiant book, but it's close enough. And I think the way that the treasure is distributed is roughly the same as the way the treasure is distributed in the Tales of the Valiant books as well. So those are 3 of the treasure generators. We also have scrolls, spell books, relics, unique weapons, and unique items. So you can pick on specific ones. If you want to just say, I want scrolls, I want to use D&D 2024 spells, and I want rare ones, and it will generate a set of scrolls, including the saves and DCs, and you could just grab this list or grab one of them and drop it into your notes. So all kinds of different treasure generation systems that are part of the 5e Artisanal database. Makes it very easy to look this stuff up. And I use them all the time. Like, again, these are tools that I use myself because I want to, because it makes it really easy to use. So these are the various treasure generators that you can find as part of the 5e Artisanal database, which you get access to by becoming a patron of Sly Flourish. Fully downloadable. You can download the entire set to your own laptop and run it all locally and know that you will always have a copy. You can run it in any web browser for the rest of your existence. There is, as I've mentioned before, bundles of holding are some of the best deals you can find in role-playing games. Bundles of holding and humble bundles have fantastic deals on bundling together lots of role-playing game products, sometimes around a particular system, sometimes a particular company, but they're always, sometimes they're 10% of the price or less of the price that you would have. And there is a new one right now for Ironsworn. This includes Ironsworn and Ironsworn Starforged. So both the sort of Bronze Age level role-playing game and then also space-based role-playing game. I have physical versions of them. I like them very much. Ironsworn, Ironsworn Starforged, Ironsworn Sundered Isles. I'm not really sure what Sundered Isles are. I don't know about Sundered Isles. And Ironsworn Delves. You can pick up this package of all 4 Ironsworn books in PDF for $15. Really good deal. Why Ironsworn? Why would I pick on Ironsworn? So Ironsworn is a both solo play and duo play, you and one player, or group play role-playing game. Really fun stuff. Takes a lot of inspiration from things like Blades in the Dark and from Fate and from Powered by the Apocalypse, and builds these sort of story-focused games. But the random tables that exist inside these books are fantastic. Their use of a thing called the Oracle, where you're rolling the Oracle die to kind of give you drive and direction. I actually ran a solo Ironsworn game, and I found it to be an amazing way to cross-train into DMing. Really lets your mind sort of get used to building these connections for improvised play. When you're doing it solo by yourself, it's heavy on the improv, heavy on what does that role mean? What does that mean for my character? What happens next? But then that helps fire up your brain so that you can do the same thing when you're running games for groups. So I really like it. $15 for all 4 of these books is a really, really good deal. They're very high quality. And even if you're not really playing Ironsworn, just the tables alone, the references and the tables alone give you really good ideas. Ironsworn Delve is their sort of dungeon delving side of it. Really neat stuff. So I highly recommend it. Sundered Isles, I guess, is their piratey sort of thing. I haven't really seen Sundered Isles. I haven't tried it out. But I really did dig the Ironsworn. Starforged was really cool if you like space exploration kind of things. Really fun. But the tables are absolutely fantastic. So that is the bundle of holding for Ironsworn and Ironsworn Starforged. And these other ones, you can find a link to that down in the show notes. Ghostfire made a campaign setting that I kind of slept on. I don't really remember it. And I don't think I have it, so I'm going to pick it up, called Aethereal Expanse. And Aethereal Expanse, I believe James Hake was either the lead designer or one of the lead designers for the Aethereal Expanse. He was a former, published Wizards of the Coast writer as well. And it's their take on Spelljammer. So if you liked Spelljammer, but you wanted more out of it, like I did, if you wanted more of a campaign setting book for Spelljammer, the Ethereal Expanse book is a whole campaign setting set around the Spelljammer world. I haven't picked it up yet. I'm going to get it as part of this Kickstarter. I'm actually going to go back this Kickstarter and probably pick up physical versions. And so they have a new Kickstarter for the Ethereal Expanse Dreamed of the Drowned God, which is a large campaign setting that is done by Will Doyle. Will Doyle is the lead designer of numerous Wizards of the Coast adventures and one of the designers of Wizards of the Coast adventures, including he was one of the designers that designed parts of the most popular D&D adventure, I think, of all time by sales, which is Curse of Strahd. But he also did Tomb of Annihilation. He did parts of other adventures. Oh, and he and his partner both did Wild Beyond the Witchlight, which was one of my favorite adventures. So they've done wonderful adventures. They're both, and he's a cartographer as well. So he's done a lot of the actual cartography. I don't know if he's doing the cartography for this, but he did for those. And so they brought Will Doyle on to work on this large campaign adventure, a level 1 to 13 plane-based exploration adventure by Ghostfire for this group. Looks really, really good. Excellent designers, and looks like a really outstanding product. So I am very excited for this. And I had missed Ethereal Expanse, but now might be the time where I can kind of dive back into that idea of the Spelljammery sort of world, because I really felt like Spelljammer did not, the Spelljammer box set didn't really give me what I was looking for when it came to an actual campaign book that I can run. So Looks really, really good. So you can find the link to this Kickstarter down in the show notes for the Ethereal Expanse Dreamed of the Drowned God. My only complaint is I don't think that they have a sample of what they show, but boy, we have lots of samples of the quality of the work that have come out of Ghostfire Gaming over the years. Very big publisher in the industry who have made a lot of really outstanding stuff. So I am excited. For that. So that's Ethereal Expanse Dreams of the Drowned God by Ghostfire Games. So, well, we didn't have a lot of big news, and all of a sudden we had a lot of big news. And the big news is that Critical Role Season 4 has finally chosen the system that they're running, and it is Shadowdark. What? Oh, no, this just in, it is not Shadowdark. I take that back. It is actually D&D 2024. That Critical Role announced what system they are using for their keynote show. So Critical Role now has a bunch of different series that they do, but their number one show is their main Critical Role show. This is the show that got everything started. The very long series show that they run. And there was a lot of speculation about what system they were going to use for their big keynote show. This is the big show that gets, it's the number one by views. I think it's the number one by views of all streaming RPG shows. I'm pretty sure that that's right. And we weren't sure what system they were going to use. And obviously the choices were really between D&D, or at least one version of D&D. We weren't even sure exactly which version of D&D, and Daggerheart, their own self-published RPG. We ran a very informal poll on the Sly Flourish Discord server, and I think out of 32 votes, 30 of them said it was going to be Daggerheart, and 2 said it was going to be something other than Daggerheart. One of those said D&D 2014, and one said D&D 2024. So out of that group of people, only one person got it right. I expected it was going to be Daggerheart. I thought it was going to be Daggerheart. And so I was definitely surprised that they chose D&D 2024. What's really interesting to me, though, is that whatever they had chosen, it was going to be a really interesting conversation. If they had chosen Daggerheart, there's no choice for system that they would have made that would not have been really interesting as far as I'm concerned, and gotten a lot of attention. Because, I mean, what system would they have chosen where you'd be like, oh yeah, that was expected, and nobody would talk about it? None of them. Because if they had chosen Daggerheart, that would have been a massive change for Critical Role to switch out of D&D and now be running their own system. Not exactly unexpected, because they now have their own system. So that would have been really interesting to see. But then if they pick D&D, well, that tells us something, because wait, didn't you guys just publish a brand new RPG yourselves? Why aren't you using your own RPG? That's certainly a question that people have asked. Many people have asked. And which version of D&D are you going to run? They've been running D&D 2014 all of this time for the last 10 years. Or so, yeah, about 10 years, 8 or 9 years. So why would they have picked D&D 2014 and stuck to that? Or do they jump to D&D 2024? And if they're picking 24, well, that's really a new system too, kind of, right? I mean, D&D 24 is new enough that they made new books for it, right? They're selling new class, they're replacing a lot of old material with new material. They're updating a lot of stuff. So it's really kind of a new system, if you ask me. It's pretty close to a new system. So what does that mean? The idea that they picked D&D 2024 isn't necessarily they're sticking to the old thing, because that's not the old thing. That's a brand new system. Now, granted, one thing, and they mentioned this in the videos where they talked about this, they have the 2 lead designers of D&D 2024 are now employees of the company. So they can literally have them house rule stuff for them. They can write supplements for them. They can give them rule adjudications. They can describe how things are supposed to work. I think, as Brendan Lee Mulligan said, I now have these guys, I can text them about rules and get answers directly back. They can directly get answers back and forth on it. So that's really interesting. I don't know if we're ever going to know exactly why they chose D&D 2024. There's probably a lot of internal conversations. There's certainly tons of speculation outside of Critical Role, outside of the company, on why they chose this. And it goes the full gambit from maybe they just wanted to, right? Maybe they just wanted to play D&D 2024. They like D&D. Brendan Lee Mulligan is certainly very comfortable with D&D 5e, so why not just stick to 5e? It's what they know, it's what their players know, and that's kind of what they said in the video. So part of it could be that's just wanted. Or Wizards of the Coast could have filled up a giant cargo container full of all of that lost E1 money that they had and wheeled it to their warehouse and said, hey, remember all that E1 money we lost? We actually found it in one of our couch cushions. It's about $500 million, and we're going to just put it right out here in front of your organization. And by the way, here's there's like a dice tray that says D&D on it if you wanted to put that into your show. So really like the range of possibilities. I was definitely leaning on the side of, I bet you they just did it because they wanted to do it. But then I saw some pretty convincing arguments that said, no, there has to be some kind of deal. Because one of them is Critical Role does sponsor. They do allow sponsorships. They have people that pay for marketing and advertisement on the Critical Role show. And my understanding is they charge about they charge about 5 figures for advertisement for one spot, right? So they're charging the rest of the RPG community a lot of money for just small spots. So why would they give a free pass to the number one RPG company in the world and say, no, we're going to be advertising your game every minute for the next 150 episodes of this show for free? Right? Why would you do that? Right? Why would you give them such a free pass? Again, they're not a non-for-profit, and neither is Wizards of the Coast, right? Wizards of the Coast is a profit-driven, publicly traded company. Hasbro is a profit-driven, publicly traded company. And Critical Role, from what we know, is they're a multi-million-dollar a year company, right? They're a great big company. I heard somebody said that they had like 70 full-time staff. That is a huge company, right? They have an Amazon cartoon series. So the idea that there wouldn't be some kind of business deal seems really odd, right? To me, it feels like it would be really odd if there wasn't some kind of business deal. Does it matter that much? I don't think so. Like, does it make me, no. So one thing that I get the benefit of, I'm not like a giant, huge Critical Role fan who has a huge, like, oh my God, they have to go a certain way, or I feel like they've sold out, or I really wanted to pick. Like, there's definitely a lot of people that are both that are unhappy with the fact that they didn't pick Daggerheart. They feel betrayed. I've heard people say that they felt betrayed, that, hey, you went through all the trouble of making this game. We bought this game, and now you're not even using this game in your key store. You're not even supporting your own game. Obviously, that's not true because they're running Daggerheart with lots of other series. They just hired 2 new designers, like probably the top 2 designers in the industry to come and work on Daggerheart stuff. So they're absolutely supporting Daggerheart. But you can understand where they felt like, I thought you were all in on Daggerheart, and you're not all in. You're still playing D&D for your main show. That's interesting. And then you got people who love D&D. They really love the brand of D&D, and they're very happy to see Critical Role continuing to embrace D&D. So you're seeing people that feel very strongly with it on both sides. I don't really feel strongly one way or the other. And I'm also not a huge critter. So for me, like, I don't have any kind of emotion that makes me feel good or bad about it. With either case, I think it's really interesting. Like I'm fascinated by how interesting it is. And I'll be honest, wow, is this a really, really good and important thing for Wizards of the Coast and for D&D? I think it would have hurt them significantly if they did not use D&D for Critical Role Season 4. I think it would have been a big sign in the zeitgeist. I already felt like when I was watching Gen Con, when I was sitting in my basement next to the cat litter enjoying Gen Con through videos, I really felt like Daggerheart was like the key big piece of attention. They had that big seminar where they talked about Daggerheart. You had Chris Perkins and Jeremy Crawford, former designers for Wizards of the Coast that worked on D&D 2024, talking about the new stuff that they were doing for Daggerheart. When they talked about Keith Baker, the creator of Eberron, was going to be making a world for Daggerheart. And then they had that big seminar for Critical Role where they were talking about Brendan Lee Mulligan running the show. And they had Chris and Jeremy come up and they were all that whole thing. Wow, it felt like so much attention was being focused on Critical Role. And I was like, what did Wizards announce? Did they even announce a product? I don't even think they announced the product that hadn't already been announced. They ran a lot of D&D games. We got to see more about the starter set. We got to hear about stuff that they were doing. There were Wizards of the Coast people that were there that were doing interviews with folks, and that was great. But boy, the attention was not on D&D as far as like in my feelings, right? And, you could argue, oh no, there was tons of attention there. Well, I can tell you how I felt about it. And how I felt about it was all of the spotlight was going over to Daggerheart. And I was like, man, if that keeps up, if they say, yeah, Daggerheart is the system we're running for Critical Role Season 4, and Critical Role completely separated itself from D&D, which is not an unreasonable thing to do, right? Because if they're still running D&D, and I'll give you an interesting example. I don't want to keep bringing up the OGL thing, but I'm going to bring up the OGL thing. So when the OGL thing occurred, a lot of major players in the RPG space, like Ginny D, I remember people talking about Ginny D, and they're like, man, if you pissed off Ginny D, you really did something wrong, right? And she had a very like heartfelt, direct video about what a mess the OGL thing was. Do you know who was really quiet about it? Critical Role. Right? They didn't say anything about it. They kind of said something along the lines of like, we are here working in the industry and we're supportive of everybody that's in it. But they never mentioned anything. And my question was, is that because they had an ongoing deal with Wizards of the Coast? Were there issues of non-disparagement clauses that they had? They had this connection and they didn't really say anything. Now, maybe they still couldn't even today. Maybe whatever happened, they still couldn't say anything like that. But you got to think like, at what point do you want to do kind of like what Kobold Press did and say, yeah, we know that Tales of the Valiant is never going to be as big as D&D is, but now we're running our own show. We have our own game. We have our own system. It's all compatible with one another, and it's backward compatible with the other stuff. In the same way, Critical Role could basically say, look, we have our own game, our own system. I mean, they spent all of that money building Daggerheart, right? All of that money. And it's a really beautiful product, right? It is a really, really top-end product. To say like, yeah, we're not even going to use it for our own show, that's an interesting choice, right? And again, I said like, it is an interesting choice no matter how you look at it. But I really think the winners in this one are definitely Wizards of the Coast and D&D. And now I feel like they've got like 4 aces in their sleeve. Ace number 1, they are the system that Critical Role is going to be using for the next version of their game. And it's this new West Marches style. They have Brendan Lee Mulligan, who's a super popular game master that's going to be running it. So lots of attention are going to be applied to D&D 2024 in particular, because they are moving to D&D 2024. So it's not even that they're still playing D&D. It's they're playing the most recent version of D&D. They also have Stranger Things coming up soon, right? They have this Stranger Things is coming out. We can assume and hope that there's some mention or some talk about D&D in Stranger Things. We know that the Duffer brothers who make it actually worked with Wizards of the Coast a little bit on the Stranger Things starter set, which is really the third ace of you have a D&D Stranger Things starter set and a new D&D starter set that are both coming out in the next few months while all the attention is being applied. And the fourth one to me might be a little bit smaller, but it's what system they're going to be running for Acquisitions Incorporated at the Penny Arcade Expos, at the PAX games that are going on. And it certainly looks like they're going to be running D&D and maybe D&D 2024. We'll have to see. So if all of those are still focused on D&D, that is a lot of attention being applied to D&D in major areas. So fascinating situation, fascinating topic. My own feeling is like I didn't have any major like, oh, they definitely want to pick one way or the other. I certainly still feel that attention being applied to D&D, bringing that attention to D&D, and D&D being one of the Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro being one of the few companies that can truly capitalize on getting that attention, getting these things in big box stores, working marketing angles and all sorts of different angles. They have a far bigger budget to be able to get the topic of role-playing games out to more people than others. And then once they're there, then we can bring them into the hobby and we can show them all of the other games that we have. Certainly Critical Role is going to be, people that are into Critical Role are certainly going to know about Daggerheart. So they're going to know about other RPG systems that are out there, and hopefully it can all work out. So I certainly don't see it as a bad thing. I think it is a very interesting choice that they made, and I'm kind of fascinated by the whole topic. One thing that I did a little bit of research on recently was exactly what kind of impact streaming shows have for D&D. There's a huge EN World thread. I actually was in there at like 5:30 this morning. There's a huge EN World thread talking about this kind of thing. And I saw folks, there was one person, but there was multiple people that were talking about it, who were making the statement that I don't think streaming games really brought that much attention to D&D. So there were definitely people who feel like, oh, I don't know that the streaming games actually brought a lot of attention to D&D. But you know who disagrees with you? Wizards of the Coast. Wizards of the Coast multiple times since 2017 has made statements based on polls and surveys. This one came back in, I think this was in 2017, this article. Yeah, November 2017. Over half of the new people who started playing 5th edition, the game's most recent update launched in 2014, got into D&D through watching people play online, says Nathan Stewart, Senior Director of Dungeons & Dragons. Right, so the senior director for Dungeons & Dragons at the time, back in 2017, said that over half of the new people who started playing 5th edition got into D&D through watching people play online. Over half of the people. Imagine how much money that is, right? You could kind of say like half of the money that they got selling the products were coming from people who learned how to play through streaming games. That wasn't the only quote. Greg Tito said something quite similar in the Nerdist in March of 2018. More and more people are finding out about Dungeons & Dragons, not through family and friends, which has always been the way that people find out about most things in our culture, says Greg. But now streaming is the number one reported answer for how people find out about and want to get into Dungeons & Dragons. It surpassed friends and family for the first time that we've known in our surveys. That was from Greg Tito, who worked at Wizards of the Coast at the time, and gave that. That was in 2018? That was in March 2018. But Mike, that was like 7 years ago. I'm sure by now everybody's gone back to just learning about it from friends and family at home, right? The answer to that is no, not according to Greg Bilsland, who is now a producer at Wizards of the Coast for Dungeons & Dragons, who made a statement in August 7th of this year, so just a couple of weeks ago. And he said, it's widely agreed that the most recent edition is the most successful edition of D&D ever, and that is largely accounted for from the success of streaming and live play, Bilsland said. That's Greg Bilsland, the senior producer of Dungeons & Dragons over at Wizards of the Coast, who's worked on it as long as the 4th edition days, left, and then came back, and now he's an executive producer over at Wizards of the Coast for Dungeons & Dragons. So even today, just a few weeks ago, Wizards of the Coast definitely recognizes the value that streaming has for bringing new people to the game. In some cases, the largest driver. Stranger Things obviously is a big one. They wouldn't have bothered to make a Stranger Things box set if that wasn't true. So there's a lot of attention being applied, which again gets to that idea of like, is Critical Role being compensated to run D&D 2024? From a business perspective, you'd kind of hope they are. That if they're bringing this much attention to D&D, you kind of hope they're getting something from it, right? Like, why would they do it otherwise? I mean, other than the fact that they love it, right? We love D&D. I play D&D and they're not paying me to do it. So like, you know, there are reasons why, but that's a big drive, right? I mean, even if they're like, yes, we would like a license and we're going to take it and donate it, right? They can donate it to charity. It's still, you know, for that amount of attention, it'd be very surprised. So how would we know? How would we know if they actually are sponsoring it with actual cash money? Well, somebody could tell us, but we may not hear about that because probably any deal that they had is almost certainly under some kind of non-disclosure agreement. So there's kind of two signs that I would look at. One is, how much branding of D&D do you see in season 4 of Critical Role? Are they using D&D dice trays? Are there D&D logos, up and about anywhere else? Do they make heavy use of D&D Beyond and talk about their use of D&D Beyond? Do they do D&D Beyond like sponsorships on the show like they did before? If you see stuff like that, pretty good evidence that yes, indeed, they received funding for this. And again, I'm not knocking them for receiving funding. I'm sure there are people like, oh, you sold out. Come on, these guys got money from Amazon. They put money for all kinds of stuff. Like, they're a commercial outfit. I don't hold it against them. So that would be one sign. What would be a sign to the opposite? So the sign that they didn't receive any funding would be if they don't really talk about anything about D&D. They're using D&D as their system. They're using D&D 2024. If they are critical of the system while they're playing it, if they kind of make fun of it, make subtle gags and jokes about some of the weird idiosyncrasies that they can find, that would certainly be a sign that maybe they don't really have a sponsorship deal. If they don't really talk about the fact that they're using D&D Beyond, if they don't really have any other sort of branding that they're using, those would, to me, would be signs that they did not get paid. So I think those are two sets of signs. I don't know that those are 100% guarantees either way. So we don't really know. Anyway, a really fascinating topic, something that I think is really interesting, and we'll see how it goes. Does it matter too much? Not really. I think it definitely matters for the hobby. And I think it's good for the hobby. I will argue that it is good for the hobby because I think that D&D definitely is a gravity well to bring people into the RPG hobby who then find all of the rest of the products that we have. I have heard people argue that D&D is somehow smothering the rest of the TTRPG industry, that if D&D somehow magically stopped existing, that suddenly the role-playing game would blossom into something else. I don't think there's any evidence to that. I have never talked to any publisher who thought that that was the case. Every publisher I've ever talked to has said, no, D&D definitely brings people into the hobby who then find other products. I heard direct quotes that were being quoted from Steve Jackson Games, who was talking about GURPS. And he said, I love it when D&D comes out with a new version because 1% of those people get frustrated with what they find, look for other ones and find GURPS, right? So, I mean, and people have been talking this way basically since there have been any kind of other RPG products. It's been well known that D&D is kind of paving the path to bring people into the hobby who then find other stuff. I believe that that's true as well. So I look at this and I am totally happy for D&D to do very, very well, because I think when D&D does very well, the rest of the hobby does well as well. So I'm excited for it. Really interesting to see. Speaking of D&D, we have seen a new Unearthed Arcana come out from D&D. I don't cover Unearthed Arcanas on this show because I'm not really into like showing off playtest documentation and stuff like this. However, this one is particularly interesting because of the kind of information we get based on the stuff that they are releasing. So they released 4 new subclasses. Those subclasses include Circle of Preservation for druids, the gladiator for the fighter, the defiled sorcerer, or defiled sorcery for the sorcerer, and the sorcerer king patron for the warlock. So obviously, when we look at these, we definitely know that they are coming out with a new Hollow Earth campaign setting. What? Oh, no, I'm sorry. I have that wrong. Dark Sun. That's what I meant. Dark Sun. We look at this. It very clearly looks like Dark Sun. Doesn't mean they're coming out with a Dark Sun setting. There's lots of questions that surround this whole thing. How are they going to, are they coming out with a Dark Sun product, period? Right? We don't know. Are they going to be coming out with something that's like the Spelljammer box set or the Planescape box set? Is it going to be more of like it's Dark Sun adjacent and it has Dark Sunny sort of things, but it's not exactly Dark Sun like the Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft was for Ravenloft. It really didn't talk about Strahd and Barovia. It had only little bits, but it's really more about this larger thing. There's so many questions. If they do a Dark Sun product, how are they going to handle a lot of the problematic themes and focuses that exist inside Dark Sun? How are they going to work with some of that stuff? That's a big question. But the real question that's on everyone's mind, that's on your mind and my mind, is how are they going to manage to squeeze Baldur's Gate into Dark Sun? I think that's really what we all want to know, right? Is it Darker's Gate? What are they going to do to shove Baldur's Gate into Dark Sun? I think that's really the hard-hitting question that we want answered on this. I've been practicing that joke. I hope you enjoyed that joke. I've been practicing it for like 3 days. Yeah, the Astarion Dimensional Traveler. Yeah, how are you going to get Karlach? Karlach's going to show up in Dark Sun, almost certainly, right? Can't ever... And how do you get Drizzt? How is Drizzt going to show up in your Dark Sun game? Is a really good question, too. I make fun. Mike's going hard on the bits today. Yep. So anyway, it's really interesting. What does it mean? Who knows? I kind of expect, I'm seeing this. I would expect we're going to see some kind of Dark Sun-like product probably by the end of next year. We'll see what exactly it is. And really, we don't know. A lot of people really like Dark Sun. My friend Teos Abadia absolutely adores Dark Sun. And then, of course, the big question is it going to be good? And then what does good mean? And if you are a huge fan of Dark Sun, it's very unlikely they're going to nail every single thing you want. That's just how it works, and it's how fandom works, right? When we're huge fans of things, we have a Dark Sun product in our head. I would really love to see an Eberron Rising from the Last War or the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica style product for Dark Sun. I want a source book. That's what I really want. I don't need a giant campaign adventure like the Dragonlance adventure. I don't think I own it, right? I only think I bought that. I don't need another giant expensive box set that really has a lot of cardboard and not nearly enough page count. And I don't want like just stuff that I'm only supposed to use once so that you can try to sell me some product later. I want a source book. I want a book that gives me lots of stuff to let me build adventures in that setting for as long as I want. That's what I really want. That's the kind of product that I want. And I would be very excited to see it. I like Dark Sun. I've ran Dark Sun campaigns in 4th edition. I really like them. I have a lot of 2nd edition Dark Sun stuff because I think it's really cool. So we'll have to see. Anyway, it was pretty interesting to see that they seem to be doing something with Dark Sun. What it is, who knows? We'll have to see. Our friends over at Monte Cook Games released a new Cypher system preview. The Cypher system preview shows off, I've talked about, so Cypher is the system that backs Numenera. I'm a fan of Cypher. I found it from a GM standpoint to be my favorite game to game master for because of how easy it is to build pretty much any challenge that you need to build at any level. I really enjoyed my Numenera campaign. My players didn't enjoy it quite as much as I did. My players found that some of the mechanics, some of the weird idiosyncrasies of the mechanics caused them some heartburn and were things that they never really got across. They were very nice. We played about a 14-month-long Numenera campaign. We played across almost all of the tiers of that game. I thought the storyline was excellent, and I think they did too, but they definitely crashed against some of the mechanics. Some of the things that my players crashed against are things that I know are being directly addressed in the new edition of the Cypher system. So Cypher is the underlying RPG system that was behind Numenera. So it's interesting to see what this is. I've talked about this a little bit in the past on some of the things they mentioned, like now having a damage track that's separate from your resource pools. Before it was like, well, you could either do a power attack, but basically if you do a power attack, you're eating your own hit points in to do it. And I know players that are like, it was very risk-averse players really have a hard time of like, why am I lowering my hit points in order to try to do things to not lower my hit points so much, right? That they felt like either way, I'm having to sacrifice this stuff. Now they are separate things, so that's really good. One of the other complaints that I have about it, however, doesn't look like it's really been addressed in this, and that's how experience points are handled. In my games, I basically said you have a pool of temporary experience points that you can use to do rerolls in the game you're in, or permanent experience points that you use in order to level up your character. It's very easy to house rule that in Cypher. It looks like it'll still be pretty easy to house rule it. But it was something they didn't really cover in this, that you still have experience points that you earn while you're doing it. You earn them from different things. So you can earn them from adventuring, you can earn them from character arcs, you can also earn them from GM intrusions. but they're still kind of used the same way as far as I could read. So I kind of like a separation because I just don't feel like, when you want to re-roll an attack roll, that means you don't level as quickly. I didn't really dig that idea. And I know they've got like thoughts about, well, no, it's not. It's really intended to be that way. But yeah, it just doesn't feel right. Like when you're taking a thing and turning it into a temporary buff that should be a permanent buff, that's a little weird. Another thing that's strange, I don't think it's something I disagree with, but they've kind of changed what ciphers are. So ciphers in the original, it's called the Cypher system, right? Ciphers in the original one were little relics, the physical devices that did cool things. Well, now ciphers, they say, are primarily temporary buffs that your character gets and can use that are not tied to a physical object. I think that came from the other systems and the other worlds that they were applying the Cypher system to since Numenera and everything like that. But it was a change it was a change for me in how these things work, that ciphers were actually things that became part of your character, not a thing that you would carry around with you, but that some ciphers did. So it was really kind of an interesting shift. Anyway, if you want to see it, there's a link down in the show notes to the 15-page preview. I'm going to be playing some Cypher games at GameholeCon, which is coming up here in a couple of months. And I would not be surprised if they start to use some of these new rules for the Cypher games that they're running at conventions. So I'm hoping to get a chance to actually see this in play. But either way, they're going to be doing a Kickstarter soon, or backer kit, whatever they're doing, and I'm going to be on board because I really like the Cypher system. I think it's really a lot of fun. So you can take a look at the Cypher preview. You can find a link to that down in the show notes. I get some preview copies of things from time to time, and the fine folks that made Nimble sent me the Nimble box set. And I wanted to talk about Nimble today, and I wanted to show off some of the cool things that you get in this box set. Keep in mind that I was given a review copy of this to talk about. I did not buy it with my own hard-earned cash, but I still think it's very cool. And I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about Nimble, show you what it's about, and I'm going to give you a link to a free preview so you can take a look at the rule set itself. Evan Diaz sent me the copy. Thanks to Evan for sending me this preview copy of it. And I got the preview copy a while ago, but I don't think it was available for general sale. And now it is available for general sale. So I spent some time diving into it. Oh, I almost dumped it on the floor. It's so big. There's so much stuff in here that I almost dumped it on the floor. So I'm going to talk about some of the cool stuff that you get, and also show you where you can take a deeper look into Nimble yourself and ask yourself, is this the kind of thing that I would be interested in for myself or for running my games? So what is Nimble? Nimble it's referred to as a 5e compatible fast tactical RPG. I would say they're stretching that 5e compatibility line a bit much. That can you convert stuff from 5e into Nimble? Absolutely. But it is very much a different system, right? It is a different system, different character sheets, different mechanics. It's very different than other things. And while it can be converted, and while you can sort of wrap certain concepts of Nimble on top of your existing 5e game, you're really doing a pretty deep conversion, way more. Like really, when we hear about the conversion differences and whether or not D&D 2024 is compatible with D&D 2014 or other 5e systems, if we're having arguments about whether or not that is compatible, then this is way outside of what is compatible there. But boy, it is a cool looking, beautiful product. The box set includes a set of books, digest size hardcover books, the core rules, the Game Master's Guide, and a Book of Heroes. The Book of Heroes are like your actual character classes that are unique for Nimble. They have some really interesting character classes. Your core rules tells you about like what's the wrapper that you can put on top of your RPG system. How does this game work? What are the mechanics like? The books are very high quality, really, really good, like glossy pages, beautiful artwork. They are thread-bound books. They've got the there are bookmarks in it that cats love to play with. I have proven that to be the case. So, the production quality on this is really, really outstanding. It is not a cheap box set. It's a $150 box set for everything, which includes the 3 books. It includes a GM screen. It includes a set of adventures. It includes a deck of cards for monsters and character abilities and stuff like that. So, but the GM screen is one of those cool kind of half-height GM screens that you get. So the physical product quality is absolutely outstanding. And you're paying for that physical quality. It is certainly not cheap, but it feels like a very complete RPG. There is a cloth map. I didn't even open the map yet, but there's a cloth map to the region world that's there. Really, really, really cool looking stuff. But let's talk about the system itself. And to do that, I want to talk about the free quick start rules. So the free quick start rules you can get on the site. I will link to it down in the show notes so you can take a look. They are the 15-page quick guides to what Nimble is all about. And that way, probably while I'm going through this, you will read it and have an opinion. Right. And from that opinion, you can decide, is this the kind of system that I'm interested in? But I also want to talk about like where this RPG fits among RPGs. Like, I think that's an interesting take. As Z-Spell here on Discord, or on Discord, on Twitch mentions, it's a $150 box set, but you can get it for $120 off of their website now. So you can get a pretty good steep discount if you pick it up off their website. So some base things for Nimble. First of all, it has 4 stats instead of the basic 6. It has strength, dexterity, intelligence, and will. Those are your 4 stats. So stat bonuses are just bonuses. You don't have scores, and you can pick a mix of different stats. So you can get like 2, 2, 0, and -1, or 2, 1, 1, 0. You can kind of pick different stats that you have. So I don't believe you roll for stats for this one. I think you get sort of different arrays that you can apply to these stats when you pick them. Skills as well. Certain skills that you pick up, and there's a different set of skills: Arcana, Examination, Finesse, Influence, Insight, Might, Lore, Naturecraft, Perception, and Stealth. So a different set of skills. Again, getting that idea, like, is this truly a 5e compatible thing? The skill system is completely different. When you make checks, you roll a d20, you add your modifier like normal, but the ladder is a different ladder. Easy is DC 8, challenging is DC 15, and extremely difficult is DC 20 and above. So you still pick those. And then you have saves. You have a strength save, dex save, int save, or will save, which are, based on those 4 stats that you have. You have hit points and dying. You have wounds. Let's see, hit points represent your ability. Damage reduces your hit points, which can't go below 0. When reduced to 0, you gain a wound. You are also dying until you regain hit points. While dying, your actions are limited to 1, and attacking and casting spells causes 1 wound. So you can actually act while you're dying. That's kind of an interesting thing. Another big one is that when you are making attack rolls, you do not roll. Well, you don't roll an attack roll. You only roll a damage roll. And now we're starting to see this in other RPGs as well. When I first saw this, when I first was taking a look at Nimble, I think it might have been the first time I saw somebody talking about having just damage rolls instead of attack rolls. And I was like, well, that's really strange, right? Like, how does that work? And the idea is that you basically are subtracting an armor value from the damage that you roll. There's also this idea that if you're rolling multiple dice, your leftmost dice is the die that like determines whether or not you crit and stuff like that. So if you're into the idea of having combat where you only roll damage, and then the damage is subtracted by armor rather than rolling basic attack rolls, that's certainly a different take than you might be used to if you're used to a D20 based roll. There's rules for leveling up. An interesting thing for combat is, depending on how fast you act, is the number of actions you can take. Nimble is a 3-action system. You're able to take 3 different actions on your turn, similar to kind of Pathfinder 2. But I think that these actions are actually more interesting, and you can kind of do more with an action than you typically can with Pathfinder 2, where the actions are somewhat limited. You only get like a single attack, and you can only cast, like, if you're doing Magic Missile, it's only 1 dart per action that you have. Your number of actions reset, and reactions, your ability to take opportunity attacks or do things in between turns, also take one of those actions, which means you might have to burn an action ahead of time, so then on your turn you can actually do less stuff. That's actually an interesting way to do it. So if you think about like the standard 5th edition style, you have an action, a bonus action, a reaction, and a move. And all of those are different things. They can all only do certain things, and they're all independent of the others. But if you imagine you have 3 actions, but you can use them for anything. You can use them to move. You can use them to do action-y kind of things. You can use them to do bonus action-y kind of things. But if you're taking a reaction, you're using one of those ahead of time. So then if you use a reaction to take an opportunity attack, then on your turn, you're only going to have 2 actions left to do anything else. That's kind of an interesting approach. Lots of good advice for GMs. There's a lot of GM advice, a lot of player advice, stuff that feels very, heartfelt to me as a lazy game master. It's offering a lot of the same sort of philosophies that you would find. But I'll tell you one thing that really grabbed me, where I was like, ooh, that is really cool, are monster stat blocks. Like, monster stat blocks are super, super light. So you have things like, minions, right? And minions really are just a damage die. So I was looking at like the kobolds, right? And the kobolds, I think they're in the GM book. And I was looking at the kobold, and the kobold literally has no numeric value other than, because the kobold is a minion, It has no numeric value other than the damage die that it does. Otherwise, if you hit it, it dies. It has no armor, so if you do damage to it, it dies. So really kind of interesting how they handle monsters. But the monster stat blocks for smaller monsters are really small. And I'll read it to you, right? Kobold Minion, level 1/4, small, stab, 1d4. Follows minion rules. So like there's basic minion rules. But even like the bigger ones, like a Kobold Death Warden, level 1, hold, adjacent allies gain medium armor, so it can give benefits to the other ones. Stab 2 times 1d4 plus 2, or sling ranged 8, right? Very simple stat blocks for these monsters. There's a whole pile of like bandits in here. There are 7 bandit stat blocks that take up a half a page of a digest size book. Very, very, I love super abbreviated monster stat blocks. And you're like, but if I'm a tactical guy, I like my tactical stuff. Well, the tactical stuff are these larger sort of boss stat blocks that they have. Evan, who put this together, he talked about the influence that Forge of Foes had for him. So it's for example, there's like monster stats by level in here. He mentioned his influence from Forge of Foes, which is very nice. Whole page full of cultists and horrors. So I like that. So really interesting style for how monsters work. Monsters work differently than characters in that you don't really have like an armor score. You really have like, do they have armor at all? And they either have medium armor or heavy armor. And medium armor, it means that when they take damage, you only take the damage that the dice do. You do not take the bonus damage. Heavy armor means you ignore the damage of modifiers and take half the sum of the dice rounded down. So there's different ways that like what armor means for a monster is handled very differently. It's much more of like an abstract process. So I thought that was really a neat thing. For the preview, there are small adventures that you can run to see kind of how it works. It shows you what the character sheet looks like, and it gives you some pre-gen characters, so you can actually see what this looks like. So very, very interesting system. I would recommend checking it out. Again, it is absolutely free to take a look at the quick start rules. You can find those down in the show notes, and if you think you really dig it, you can take a look at Nimble, available on their website. I'm not a fan of Counterspell. I have talked about Counterspell in shows past. I've complained about it incessantly in various areas. It is a kind of spell I refer to as a submarine spell. I call it a submarine spell because of my friend Casey, who told me a story about being an officer on a submarine. And he said one of the rules of the submarine was there's only so much joy that you can bring into a submarine. And once you close the hatch, that joy is finite. It is finite among the people in the submarine, which means the only way to gain more joy is to take it from someone else. And I feel like Counterspell is a spell like that. The only way for you to have fun with Counterspell is to take that fun from someone else. And here's a very simple question. So you might hear that and say, no, Mike, you're wrong. I love Counterspell. Okay, if you love Counterspell and you really love it, you don't need to listen to anything I'm going to say about it, right? If you're good with it, you're good with it. What I will ask you is, how do you feel when you get counterspelled? Players love Counterspell, but not when it's counterspelling them. Right? As a GM, I don't like Counterspell either direction. That's one of my problems. Like, I don't like taking actions away from players. I don't like eating the thing that they wanted to do. And I also don't like it when my monsters have one of their things taken away that was like the main thread of what they had. So I've been looking to try to figure out a solution to Counterspell. Counterspell has been addressed in 2 different ways from 2 different versions of 5th edition. Level Up Advanced 5e had a different take on Counterspell that I really dug. And D&D 2024 handles Counterspell differently. And what I'm trying to do is I think we can take both approaches and I think we can bring them together and make a new Counterspell that doesn't suck nearly as much fun out of the game as Counterspell can. I also think we can solve another problem, a frustration that I've had multiple players describe to me. I have multiple players that have had this frustration. I hadn't really been paying much attention to it, and then I finally heard enough of them to be like, yeah, that's really a problem. And that problem is with monsters that have spell-like abilities that are not spells. This is very common in Tales of the Valiant, and it is very common in D&D 2024. So here's an example of a D&D 2024 5.2 SRD mage. And the mage has a multi-attack. The mage makes 3 arcane burst attacks. Arcane burst, melee or ranged attack roll, +6 to hit, range 120 feet, 16 force damage. That sure feels like a spell, right? That sure feels like a spell. However, it isn't a spell, which means you cannot counterspell it. It'll burrow through any magic resistance if you have anything that helps you prevent damage that you're getting from spell-like attacks. Anything like that is not affected by that. And the mage has that. The archmage has something very similar. 4 arcane burst attacks, +9 to hit, 27 force damage each. That's a lot of damage that this thing does, and yet it's not an actual spell. And the lich, for example, makes 3 attacks with Eldritch Burst. Eldritch Burst +12 to hit, 31 force damage for an Eldritch Burst. Feels a lot like a spell, but isn't a spell. And if you're a lazy DM like I am, you're going to focus on these because they're really easy to run. You don't have to worry about lining people up. You just throw damage out there and the damage goes out there, and you can still describe it as spell-like abilities. But my players are like, but those are freaking spells. Those feel like spells. Why can't I counter it? Why can't I counter those spells? Well, you can't counter because they don't have a level, right? They don't count as a spell. There's nothing that says it's a spell, and they don't even have a level. And a lot of the previous counterspells required that they had certain levels that they did things. But I argue that we can actually solve this problem, this single problem of the submarine effect of a counterspell with also this effect of these arcane bursts. So I have sort of a new version of counterspell that I'm tweaking and working on, and I wanted to offer it up and sort of get thoughts on it and things like that. So the solution is mixing together the Level Up Advanced 5e counterspell and the D&D 2024 counterspell into one thing. And I took words from both of them to put this together. Counterspell. You attempt to interrupt a creature in the process of casting a spell. The creature makes a Constitution saving throw. On a failed save, the spell dissipates with no effect, but the creature can use its reaction to cast a cantrip or another spell with the same casting time as the original spell. This new spell must be cast at a spell level equal to or less than half of the original spell slot. If the original spell was cast with a spell slot, the slot isn't expended. So this does two things. From D&D 2024, instead of doing a weird skill check against the DC of the spell, you're instead the creature that is getting counterspelled makes a Constitution saving throw. A, that's a lot more straightforward. It acts a lot more like everything else does. And B, it means that legendary monsters can use legendary resistance to resist this and not have their big spells countered. So that's one big one. The other one, this one has no level limit like the previous one did. This one you have no worry about what the spell's level is, which can definitely help. And then the element that I took from Level Up Advanced 5e is the idea that it doesn't necessarily take away your whole action, because when your spell is counterspelled, you can still take your reaction right then to cast another spell that's half the level of the spell you cast or lower, or a cantrip. I added the cantrip bit because I don't think it had that originally, and I think Level Up Advanced 5e kind of treats them as like 0 level spells, but I was like a cantrip. Okay, so that to me works a lot better. I would not feel nearly as bad having monsters counterspell characters when I know that they could have their spell countered, but they could still do something on their turn. They still get a benefit. I still like that. But what about the other part of it? What about those spell-like abilities? So I added this little component to it as well. The GM may determine that as monsters' attacks are spell-like attacks that can thus be counterspelled and affected by other abilities that trigger off of spell attacks. If you counterspell a monster's use of multi-attack with these spell-like attacks, it loses all attacks, but can use its reaction to make a single spell-like attack. So the idea here is if you're casting Counterspell on a mage, and the mage was using the multi-attack make 3 arcane burst attacks, you can counterspell that. They make their Constitution saving throw. On the assumption they fail the save, they then lose that attack. However, they can take a reaction to do 1 arcane burst attack. Right? Now, that might feel actually pretty powerful, right? But I was trying to think about it another way, which is like, what if you only removed 1 of the 3 attacks? I'm like, I don't know that that's enough that it's worth casting a 3rd level spell to try to get rid of 1 of these, which they can do at will. So I really feel like you have to do kind of all of them. Also, they still get their saving throw like normal. And creatures like a lich still have legendary resistance, so they can still force that their blast is going to get through anyway. One other thing I haven't tweaked on this yet is spell level. Like, what does if you have another ability like Globe of Invulnerability that is affected by spell levels, what level would these spells be? So it doesn't matter for Counterspell, but it kind of matters for other ones. And I think my argument is that these would count as spell levels equal to 1/3 of the challenge rating of the monster. So for a Lich, for example, this would be the equivalent of a 7th level spell, which means the Liches would be able to penetrate through a Globe of Invulnerability. A Mage who's a CR6, these would count as level 2s, right? So this would be roughly the equivalent of casting like a pretty, and it's, a higher power, but it's not that much higher power than a Scorching Ray. right? So I think that would work. So that way you have sort of solutions to multiple problems. We have a counterspell that doesn't just completely eat the action away from the monster or from the character. It doesn't eat the spell slot if they fail the check, and they still get to make a Constitution saving throw regardless of the level of the spell. That helps with legendary monsters, it helps with other creatures, and it just streamlines the whole thing. And you can now use it against the spell-like abilities of monsters. When I brought this up to my groups, they were like, oh, thank God, finally it's a spell, because they were just annoyed that this isn't a spell. And I think it really is a failing of D&D 2024 and Tales of the Valiant and other ones that are using these spell-like abilities that aren't spells, because they sure feel like spells. They really feel like spells. And players have a lot of things that trigger off spells, and these don't count, right? Your Mage Slayer feat, right? Seriously, I can't use Mage Slayer. The guy's casting arcane bolts. I'm like, oh, not technically a spell. Like, lame. So I've added that in and they're happy. And I still think it does it in a way that means that it is not such a bad detriment for the monster that they're getting counterspelled. So that was my idea for a counterspell hack. So maybe I've said this whole thing and you hate it. Cool. You don't need to tell me you hate it. If you don't like it at all and you think counterspell is fine, I don't need you to tell me that, because my opinion doesn't matter to you. You can do whatever you want and I can do whatever I want. I'm not suggesting Wizards of the Coast go around, I don't know who it would be, because Jeremy Crawford won't do it anymore. Greg Bilsland, I guess, is going to come to your home with a big Sharpie and scratch out counterspell and then put this one in. That's not going to happen. This is my little house rule hack for people who don't like the current counterspell. If you like it, you don't need it, right? If you're happy with it, if you're happy with you getting counterspelled, then you're happy with it. But otherwise, it's an offer to you to say, hey, if you like this idea, if it's something you want to try, and hack the hell out of it. You can change it too. If there's parts of this you like, parts of it you don't like, try it out, right? Modify it and see what works for you. Another question is like, can you just ban counterspell? One thing you can do, a lazier trick, if you don't like this, but you still aren't really crazy about counterspell, is you can make an agreement with your players. And the agreement can be, you don't counterspell me, I don't counterspell you. Because I'll tell you, on the GM side in D&D 2024, the advantage is definitely on the side of the game master. Because these are not spells, because you can do these arcane burst attacks, and because the monsters, in a lot of times, have counterspells. The mage, I think, has a counterspell. Right? Mages have counterspells, archmages have counterspells, and liches have counterspells. So the major spellcasters in D&D 2024 have counterspell and also have attacks that cannot be countered. So the advantage is definitely on the side of the GM. You could make that clear to your players. If they don't like if you want to say like, hey, here's another way we could handle it, and they're like, I don't like that way. You go, the alternative is like, how about we just don't use it? Like, how about we just don't use counterspell, which is a fine approach to go with as well. So give it a try. Take a look at it. If it's not for you, it's not for you. That's totally cool. If it's something you dig, then you can take it. If you want to modify it, you're free to modify it. All of those things are available under the Creative Commons license. All the variants that I took and modified are available under a Creative Commons license. So you can try it out. But I'm curious about your thoughts. Every quarter on the Sly Flourish Patreon, we have the Patreon Q&A. Every month, patrons can ask RPG-related questions. Every Friday, I answer all of those questions. And some of those questions I bring here to the show so that we can dive in deeper. Spoiler Media asks, how do you handle campaign/adventure secrets that your players/characters know versus secrets that they don't know yet? So this is really a question about secrets in general, which is kind of like, how do you reveal them? Are they just known? Do you just give secrets away? Or do you make them have to investigate things or have conversations with people or have to make skill checks? And the answer is yes. All of those things. It depends upon the secret, and it depends upon the character, and it depends upon the approach. In some cases, I would say if a secret needs to be known in order for the game to move forward, they should just learn it. I think there are plenty of times where you can say, based on a character's knowledge in general, they're going to be able to know one of these secrets. So campaign and adventure secrets, kind of bigger secrets. You could say, well, because you're from the city, you know this to be true. And you could just give them the secret that way. Because they're from a location, because they're a particular class, because they're a particular species or background, you can give them secrets without them having to make any kind of checks at all. Then other approaches are, no, these secrets are a little bit more nuanced and detailed, and they're not going to prevent the game from moving forward. In that case, you might put them behind an ability check or some level of investigation that the characters have to do to learn them. Sometimes you just dump them out. So like I ran a game last night and I had some important secrets that I needed the players to hear because it really was going to drive where the direction of the game was going to go. There were like a specific 5 things, and I literally just had an NPC at a dinner, at a breakfast table, tell them all of these things. The NPC knew them and needed to impart this information to the character so they could make an informed choice about where they were going to go next. Those were vital secrets. I did not hide them behind ability checks. Then there were some secrets where I said, because you're a paladin, because you're a cleric, you have this ability to see things that the other characters don't see. Or maybe that there was some reason that this one character saw things that the other ones didn't see. So there's lots of different ways to both kind of limit secrets or reveal secrets. Some of them everyone knows, like the truths of a campaign. I don't really consider those secrets. Those are truths that everyone knows. The players know them, the characters know them, you know them, and you state them clearly. And that's how you build characters that fit well to the campaign you're going to run. But there are some secrets where only certain characters would know them because of certain things. Certain characters would know them because of their background, or certain characters learn them through investigation, both in world and through rolling checks. And that's how they learn things as well. So secrets are there are specific things about secrets that you generally have about 10 of them when you're prepping a session, that they're short, they're focused on things that matter to the characters, things that they would want to learn, it could be fun historical facts. It doesn't always have to be like constant drivers to get them to go somewhere. It could just be something interesting that they learn, but there's something that's relevant to the characters. They're relatively short, and you don't necessarily tie them to any specific thing in your game. That's really the only rules for secrets. And even those are loose rules. You're free to do with them whatever you want. You don't have to listen to me. So you can use secrets however are useful to you. But there aren't like hardened rules about how you reveal them or whether you do it through a check or how difficult it is to figure them out. They're intended to help you, right? Secrets are little bundles of loot that you are dropping into the game, knowledge loot that you are dropping in the game so that the characters are picking things up that are interesting, that make the game unique and interesting for the players, that drive them in interesting directions, that sort of let the game flow in a way, in the same way that like killing monsters and gaining treasure works. Right? That you get to drop these things in front of them, and you can drop them whatever path they're taking. These little nuggets of information can fall in front of them. The other one is you might modify your secrets sometimes. That sometimes you might learn some of it, but a little bit more vague, and other times you learn more specifics, and you get to decide how that works either based on checks or based on the kind of questions that they're asking. Lots of different ways. So even if you write a secret down, you don't have to reveal that exact secret the exact way you wrote it down. You could be more specific or you could be less specific depending on the circumstances in the game. It's really just a prompt to remind you, hey, here's a thing that the characters might learn in their next game. And that's really the thing to hang on to, is you're asking yourself, what 10 things might the characters learn in the next game that I'm going to run? That's really the key question to a secret. Friends, I want to thank all of you for hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed today's show. If you did, and you want to see more stuff like this, the best thing you can do is subscribe to the Sly Flourish newsletter. It is absolutely free to sign up. You can find a link down in the show notes. You get a free adventure generator PDF for signing up, and you get a weekly RPG-related article sent directly to your inbox. You can also become a patron of Sly Flourish. Patrons get access to Readings and Reflections, a podcast, a whole other podcast where I read one of my articles and talk about it aloud, and talk about how we came up with the ideas for it. You can join our awesome dedicated Discord server through the Patreon. You get access to things like the 5e Artisanal database, lots of stuff you get for being patrons of Sly Flourish. And you can pick up any of my books, including Return to the Lazy Dungeon Master, the Lazy DM's Workbook, Lazy DM's Companion, or more. All of the links for those are in the show notes. Thank you so much. Have a great day, and get out there and play an RPG.